in the vein of disrespect, there was a Bill Simmons podcast interview with Cody Rhodes, and I have his quote here that I'd like to read. And I know you don't typically like to talk about this, but I think this is worth getting your opinion on. But feeling disrespected at something I built with my friends, feeling disrespected there, I wouldn't stand for it. Does it not bother you that he's saying that he would tolerate disrespect from one place, but not the place that he helped build with you?
You know,
how are we doing, everybody? This is Case from Q101, and we are back in the Q101 Lounge. And for one more time in 2025, I am joined by my friend, Tony Khan. Tony, happy holidays. Congratulations on your 2025. How are you?
I'm very well. How was your Christmas, Case?
It was wonderful. It was capped off by a World's End pay-per-view that I know we're going to discuss. I would imagine your Christmas also went pretty well. You had quite the weekend.
I had a great weekend. I had a great Christmas. It's awesome to be here. This is exactly where I want to be right now with you, Case, talking pro wrestling. But it was a great weekend of wrestling and football and a lot of things going very well, and Christmas was awesome. Thank you.
I think the thing that I've come to enjoy most about the Continental Classic over its now 3 years is it has restored some sort of Christmas tradition in pro wrestling. You know, you and I were here talking about World Class a few months ago, and I always think about the Bockwinkel Hennig match on Christmas Day from the AWA. And I feel like in this post-Starrcade universe, we had hit a world where December was maybe marked by Ring of Honor Final Battle as the last big show of the year, but we were missing the importance of wrestling on or near Christmas Day. And when I think about the performance of Will Ospreay in the Continental Classic last year, Moxley versus Fletcher this year, and then the finals with Moxley versus Okada, it feels like a part of pro wrestling history has been brought back by AEW, and specifically the Continental Classic.
That means a lot. Thank you, Case. That's how I feel as well, and I've never heard it articulated quite like that, even though that's exactly what I was going for, and that's exactly how I feel. So it means a lot to hear that. I love having some really great pro wrestling, awesome matches and stakes, and to have something to look forward to around the holidays. I love watching the Continental Classic episodes and the pay-per-view myself around the holidays with my family. This year at Christmas, my family was watching Orange Cassidy versus Jon Moxley right after Die Hard, so that was a pretty nice night.
Good. We had you in last November, and I asked a similar question. It still hangs in my brain, and I still feel pretty strongly about this. Coming off of a match like Moxley versus Fletcher, which I think was one of the best AEW matches of the year, and I will want your AEW match of the year at some point during this interview. I think it's one of the best matches in pro wrestling this year. 6 years into AEW, I still think that is the type of match that sets you guys apart. There's nobody on earth, Mexico, Japan, Europe, United States, doing what is represented in that match. When you watch something like Moxley versus Fletcher, does it not make you want to have the default setting of AEW be a match like that? Because as time has gone on, and I understand there's place for everything in wrestling, or at least that's the idea, but I see especially on Dynamite, sometimes more comedy or sports entertainment elements creeping into the program. And I feel like you guys are at your best when you're doing something like Moxley versus Fletcher. How do you feel about that?
I absolutely agree that the Continental Classic is such a great part of the year. Moxley versus Fletcher and the Continental Classic matches. I thought the Christmas collision with 6 Continental Classic matches in one show is one of the best TV shows we've ever done. Mm-hmm. The show was stacked, and then days later, the pay-per-view happens. Of course, that's one of the best TVs we've had, and then the pay-per-view was stacked. I thought there were so many incredible things on the pay-per-view. Mox versus Fletcher is one of my favorite matches of the year. It's one of my favorite AEW matches, and I absolutely love that match. It's of the very, very highest standard. Of course, throughout the year, there's been so many awesome matches. And like you, I would love to talk about that and talk about some of the highlights. And they're all just personal opinions. I think that's one of the great things about wrestling. It's a little bit different than other sports where you can compare the stat lines, and it's an apples-to-apples comparison. A lot of it is in the eye of the beholder. And you and I both watch a lot of wrestling, and the people that watch the interviews we do, I suspect many of them watch a lot of wrestling. So I have to say, I thought the pay-per-view embodied so many great things about AEW, but really, if you talk about the TV recently, I think to your point, so much of it has been very serious wrestling because the Continental Classic has embodied the show. I think one of the great things about the Continental Classic and Continental matches is that they set the company apart with a different style and a set of rules that I'll never have anybody out there. Nobody ever will interfere in these matches, and they are one-on-one fights. So I do think that having something that is so different from what you see anywhere else in pro wrestling is very, very special. But I do think having a blend of different styles, and again, it's in the eye of the beholder. My father took me to some wrestling when I was a kid. He wasn't the biggest wrestling fan, and he's one of the smartest people in the world, just in my opinion, I think, and he's probably the smartest person I've ever known, I believe. And my father didn't always have the same taste in wrestling I did, but that made me understand that that's why it's good to have people of all different styles and people that draw different viewers into a promotion, because you want to have people coming from all different walks of life. And you and I are huge fans who watch a ton of wrestling. And when I went to ECW with my dad, I was very much into Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko and so many of the great wrestlers and the matches. And the main event of the show I was going to was RVD versus Sabu in a stretcher match.
Yeah, can you talk about your one night at the arena and just that entire experience real quick?
Absolutely. I was 13 years old, so I loved going to the show. It was an incredible experience for me to see wrestling and meet people I'd traded tapes with. But it was interesting because probably the thing that wasn't necessarily my most anticipated part of the night would be the Sandman wrestling. And my dad absolutely loved the Sandman's match and hitting people with the cane, and it was his favorite thing. And I think the greatest wrestler of all time is Steve Austin. And when Steve Austin had launched the Stone Cold and just really broke through to new fans, I had always been a Steve Austin fan. I grew up as a 7-year-old where I was like, if I could have drafted one player for the future, because that's who JR said should be the number one draft pick, he said Steve Austin and Dustin Rhodes would be the guys you would be building your company around if you started in 1991 and you were looking for the two best prospects. Steve Austin changed a lot. His presentation evolved a lot, and it brought in a lot more people. And I loved when he was wrestling Ricky Steamboat, but there were a lot of people that wanted to see him brawl and do a different presentation. Now, when my dad said that, that spoke to me, because even though the Sandman wrestling, I like the Sandman, but it wasn't necessarily the person I would list as the number one or two person I was interested in that night. So I thought that was interesting. So different people have different things. I say this because World's End, the Continental Classic, my absolute favorite time of the year for so many reasons. My dad's favorite part of the show was Orange Cassidy and Timeless Tony Storm last night, by far. He coming out of the weekend, which, to your point, there's moments that are light moments, they're fun moments. They're both incredible wrestlers. They get biggest reactions out of almost anybody in AEW. They do great ratings, and they're both great wrestlers. But it's okay to have fun too. And my dad, who's coming from a different walk of life, and you want to bring in as many fans as possible, that was his favorite part. So that was maybe a lighter moment. It was very different than Mox and Fletcher.
Yeah.
But seeing Timeless Tony Storm and Orange Cassidy dance the waltz and take people out together and do the dip, he said that was by far his favorite part of the show. So that's a valid opinion too, and it's good to have a show that brings all different parts and different kinds of wrestling and different kinds of wrestlers, I think, in my opinion.
I don't know if equation is the word I'm looking for here, but how do you balance trying to make a wrestling show that can also appeal to people that don't like wrestling? Because I do feel like that is maybe what that is an effort to, but then I go back to, like, you know, an episode of Crockett TV was wrestling for wrestling fans. And I do think we've maybe gone into this universe where it's like, well, we have to get people that don't like wrestling wrestling.
No, I want to make new fans. And I think you can make new fans by bringing them in and showing them something fun. Just look at Orange Cassidy's presentation here going into the original Revolution. We didn't show people at the beginning of AEW that Orange Cassidy can wrestle. And then that's why, in my opinion, it surprised a lot of people. And to this day, the most watched and most successful match that's done by far the most views of any AEW match is Orange Cassidy versus Pac from the original Revolution. It's a great wrestling match, but there were elements of fun that brought people into it that weren't all wrestling at first that led to a great wrestling match. I do believe it's really important that the people in AEW have the ability to be great wrestlers. And even if they don't always have that hard-hitting, bloody 37-minute match. It can also be there's different ways to get people into wrestling, but
Absolutely.
I do think having a wrestling show that has a lot of great wrestling in it every week is the key to AEW, and not all the segments need to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
But I know that when you watch AEW Dynamite and AEW Collision, there's a promise implied that you're going to see a lot of excellent wrestling in that episode, and then things that set up other matches or get you excited for another match in the future. So sometimes a way to get people excited for more wrestling is wrestling, but there are other ways to get people excited about watching wrestling too that aren't necessarily setting that segment up with wrestling, if that makes sense.
Very much so.
So I think Timeless Tony Storm and Orange Cassidy are two of the greatest wrestlers in AEW, and they can have these awesome one-on-one matches. If you look at some of the matches they've been involved in this year, Orange Cassidy and Takeshita this week had an incredible wrestling match.
Quite good.
Mox and Orange Cassidy had an awesome wrestling match. And Timeless Tony Storm's been in some of the most hard-hitting, epic one-on-one matches of the year. But they're both also capable of going out there and doing something fun and making a new fan. And my dad, scrolling through TikTok as I went to the Jags-Colts game, and before the game, I could not stop thinking about how great the Continental Classic was. I couldn't wait to go back home after Jaguars-Colts and watch Moxley and Fletcher again, and I did. And I asked him if he'd seen the show, and it was great. He had seen a lot of it, and the first thing he said was, "I just loved it when Tony Storm and Orange Cassidy danced. That was so fun." And so that's a valid opinion too.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Pac real quick. I believe he was originally in the multi-man match with Orange Cassidy and Tony Storm. Can you speak to why he ended up not being in that match?
He was, well, to be honest, it's a long story, and it worked out very well, but we've had a very hard-hitting competition, and everybody's going to be cleared after the competition, but it just worked out.
Speaking of Pac, he is my favorite wrestler in the company. A dramatically different presentation we've seen from him in the back half of 2025. I know he's a man shrouded in mystery. Lord knows I've tried to get him in the seat that you're sitting in right now, and it just hasn't worked out. But can you speak to it all, whether it's from you or it's from him or somebody else that we don't know about, the influence for the new gear and the new way that he's approached wrestling in the back half of this year?
I think that's Pac. Mm-hmm. That's definitely Pac. And it's a presentation he wanted to bring. He's a great professional. I have so much respect for him. And I think he fits so perfectly with the Death Riders. He embodies hard-hitting pro wrestling, the spirit of pro wrestling. He cares so much about it. And he brings that to the ring. And I think it's very clear to the fans that Pac, every time he goes out to the ring, this is somebody who takes this very seriously. And that's a very serious presentation he's brought to the Death Riders.
Absolutely. Speaking of Jon Moxley, I'm blown away by the year that he's had. I'm blown away by his continued evolution. Going back, I've followed his career since the early 2010s and seeing him in developmental to a main roster to AEW. It's this incredible thing. Is he the most important person you've worked with in the 6 years of AEW? I'm trying to think of somebody that has been more consistent, that you've been able to rely upon more than him, and now we're seeing maybe him reach his apex. I've enjoyed his 2025, I think, more than any other year he's ever had.
I could absolutely agree with that. I think Jon Moxley is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers and one of my all-time favorite people. Jon Moxley's so important to the foundation of the company. From the very first show, he's been here. And he has delivered this year. I agree with you. This has been my personal favorite year also. I know he's really enjoyed this year, and that makes me very happy. He's somebody who also takes wrestling very seriously and works very hard. The only person who's been at every AEW event this year besides myself is Jon Moxley. Mm-hmm. And he works so hard. He's a leader in the ring and out of the ring. And I'm so proud that we've been able to build this company over 7 years, and that we have somebody that has been able to not only be a face of AEW and not only represent throughout the years so many different great things about the company, and so many of the greatest events and moments involve Jon Moxley. But he's a fantastic person, and I'm really glad that people see what a tremendous year he's having. At the beginning of 2025, and it's all opinions, but I felt like from some of our tape trading brethren, some of the hardcore wrestling fans, I didn't feel like enough people in the hardcore wrestling community understood what Jon Moxley was doing at the start of 2025, and nobody could have known how banged up he was.
What do you mean by they didn't understand what he was doing?
I think that people, misunderstood the mission of the Death Riders, and I think that people misunderstood the physical toll that all these years of wrestling had taken on Mox. And Mox throughout this year has gotten healthier and better. And I think that's been part of why this arc throughout the year has been so fantastic. I felt like Mox physically, as the year went on, even as he continued to wrestle, actually got more and more healthy. Mm-hmm. And then I also think it worked so perfectly that as we approached Double or Nothing and the Owen Hart tournament, the stakes around the chase of Jon Moxley continued to rise and rise and rise. And it helped AEW so much. As challenger after challenger came after Jon Moxley, the promotion got a huge boost from this, and it helped make AEW in 2025 very successful commercially. And when you looked at our TV ratings, as Mox held the championship, even not factoring in our streaming, which, from December of 2024 to January of 2025, AEW became available in so many new homes, millions of homes that didn't have access to AEW before. And even though there were new ways to watch the show, our TBS numbers continued to rise and rise. And we had a really good Q1. Q2, we continued to see that great lift with Mox, and the viewership of Dynamite and Collision rose with Mox as the champion. The events continued to get bigger, and All In Texas became the most successful event AEW's ever had in North America. Our biggest ticket sales and the biggest live gate ever for AEW, and one of our biggest pay-per-view shows. And the chase of Jon Moxley, I felt, made everybody better. And I think that now, in hindsight, so many fans can see that and look back at how captivating it was to have two fan favorites like Hangman Page and Will Ospreay fighting for the love of the sport, but also to be the one to get the opportunity to fight Mox, and fighting with that honor and the promise that I'll have your back after this is over if you have my back after this is over. And then to see them all come together, it was a really incredible moment. And then I think as Mox became more and more of a sympathetic figure after that, and the fans saw what he did, it helped make this year's Continental Classic that much more captivating. To think that somebody who was as dominant as Jon Moxley, where you have an entire promotion clamoring to chase him, and then he was able to cultivate the vulnerability where people actually thought he could lose every match in the Continental Classic, absolutely. And they actually believed that. And to have Jon fight from behind and have an entire arena, and it's the same arena where one of the most popular wrestlers, I think, certainly one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, one of my favorite people of all time, is Bryan Danielson. And in this exact same arena, just over a year ago, Mox suffocated him with a plastic bag and betrayed his best friend. And after everything Mox did and seeing how unpopular as a villain he was, to have an entire arena coming and cheering for him, it was amazing. And I love football so much. And when you have these ideas, these concepts in football, to create an explosive pass play, and it can involve a lot of elements, and there's so many things that have to come together, and there's blocking, protecting the quarterback, and the routes and all the things that have to come together to make an explosive play work, and 11 people coming together in that case on a football team to make this thing successful. And in the Continental Classic, there were 12 wrestlers at a time. With Darby getting knocked out, there were 13 participants in the tournament. But everybody was so fantastic in this tournament. And I was so proud because I thought the execution of the tournament was so powerful. But to see it all come together, and when the arena got behind Mox and that Kyle Fletcher versus Jon Moxley match that you're talking about, it's one of my favorite matches. And to look at the year and put that, and then Mox versus Okada, which I thought was fantastic. And at this point now the crowd's behind Mox. It's happened.
Yep.
That shift, that organic, that feeling in the arena, it was there. And I thought it was incredible. And Jon Moxley's one of my favorite wrestlers, again, one of my favorite people. And to see him regain the respect of the fans after everything that had happened, after he suffocated Bryan Danielson and all the deplorable things we saw the Death Riders do, and to watch people forgive him in real time, that was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. That's obviously, with Moxley, it's this great long-term story that has been told and is being told, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. You're now almost 7 years into booking everything for AEW. We just passed the anniversary of the Corpus Christi Dynamite 2019, where things change. I don't know if you want to give your perspective on that night at some point, but I was thinking earlier this morning, Gabe booked Ring of Honor for 6 years before he let him go. Paulie realistically booked ECW for 6.5, 7 years before they went under. Eddie Gilbert never stayed in any place for longer than it seemed like 6 months. But you now have this very long tenure as the point guy for AEW's creative. What are you doing to ensure that the creativity stays fresh? Are there new voices in the room, new influences from older wrestling coming in? How are you able to continue doing what you're doing?
Well, I feel like I have a good gauge of AEW, and I like to hear the perspectives of different people. You're somebody I really enjoy hearing the perspective of, and I think it's really important to hear different wrestling perspectives. In the room, I've actually kind of tried to make it where I have my own outline and my own ideas before I start taking in everybody's. And I think that was, to your point, after Corpus Christi, what I decided to do. And then being collaborative, I hear a lot of ideas through the week, and I started collaborating gradually more and more on putting the outline together. And I decided this year I would just go back to putting the outline together myself, put everything together before I start asking other people what they think.
Yeah.
And I think that's been good because, it is always good to have feedback from people, but you also can't listen to 37 people contributing to one idea. And that's really what it comes down to. But I love wrestling, and I love doing it 52 weeks a year. AEW is so important to me, and I think this year's been, just in my opinion, the best year of TV shows and pay-per-views, start to finish, I think we've done. But everybody might have their own ideas of what the best shows and TV shows, pay-per-views would be. This is my favorite, and I think it was really important because after having one of the biggest wrestling media rights deals ever, certainly from a challenger promotion, by far the biggest one ever, I think the most important thing a wrestling promotion could do this year, if you're in our position, is to knock it out of the park and put great shows out. When you do a media rights deal that's a multi-year deal that's worth $500 million, it's really important to go out and, I believe, deliver quality week after week and have a loyal audience that loves the shows. And I felt like the AEW fans are very happy with AEW World's End and the Christmas shows this week, but throughout the year. And so for 2025, looking back at how many incredible TV shows there have been from the start of the year until this past week, and not only ending on these high notes with the Continental Classic and the Christmas week shows that I thought were so excellent, but having that consistency throughout the year. Great events earlier in the year. I thought the Grand Slam Australia was one of the best Collision episodes ever, up until Christmas Collision, is over 10 months later and probably even better maybe. And then you have the incredible event like Spring Breakthrough that I thought was one of the best shows of the year. And then we came out and I thought had an amazing Winter is Coming. And these are, all the way spanning the year and in the middle, some of the best events of the year as well. So, I thought the 300th episode of Dynamite in July was fantastic with Okada versus Ibushi.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so many great events throughout the year. Dynamite and Collision being really strong. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do 52 weeks a year. And I love wrestling. I'm just glad I've been able to do this so long. And I think it was really important for everybody who works in AEW at every position in the company for us to produce great TV shows and pay-per-views this year. And yeah, I think that we've really done a good job.
Why do you think it is that despite the new media rights deal, being able to celebrate something like the Sports Illustrated Awards, I know you were very excited about that at the World's End press conference, the TV that has been critically acclaimed and commercially acclaimed, why do you think it is that there is still such vocal disrespect from some corners when it comes to the AEW brand? You're a challenger brand, and it seems like if you ask a certain type of person, this year would be looked at as an overwhelming failure for the promotion, not an overwhelming success.
Well, I think...
Or do you not feel that?
Well, I think at any point, I think those same people would have said at every point in AEW, they probably would have said those same things.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's going to be negative 52 weeks a year, then you got to take everything they say with whatever the opposite of a grain of salt is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I guess in this case, for me, just like if somebody's always positive about everything you do, you say, well, take it with a grain of salt. In this case, if somebody's always negative about everything you do, you can't really put a lot of stock into that because I know we have accomplished a lot. So I think the Sports Illustrated Award exemplified so much of that success because it's an award that existed before. We had not won it. And to me, it shows progress. And it's a very legitimate publication. It is the first magazine I ever read. It, to me, exemplifies sports journalism. It's one of the two outlets that I've always followed for sports coverage and always looked to. And, as a magazine, it's probably the magazine I've read the most in my life, and they didn't cover that much wrestling when I was a kid. It would have been unthinkable to me just as a fan, not involved in wrestling as a child, to have wrestling awards in Sports Illustrated. I would have loved that.
Yeah.
And to be named their best wrestling promotion, again, when we did not win it the year before, it shows to me we've made great strides, great progress. And I was sitting here in the same seat with you a year ago, and I think we've made a lot of progress in many ways since then. So to me, it's been a great year. The quality of the shows has been fantastic. Under the importance of the media rights deal, not just the pressure, but it's the importance. It is pressure, but it's important, and you have to deliver. And with the gravity of that situation, I think we've been able to really step up and deliver. And that, to me, makes this a great year for us. So I think that as we look back at 2025, and again, you're such a big wrestling fan, and I'm sure you have encyclopedic knowledge of some of the great moments and events that have happened this year. But as a business going into 2026, we're in an incredibly strong position because we've got great fans all over the world. They love the shows right now. Our feedback from our fans is far more positive than it was a year ago. So I should feel really good about that, I think.
I do want to get to Hiroshi Tanahashi and his retirement, but I do want to stay on this for just 1 second. And in the vein of disrespect, we talked to each other so much in July because you were here with the Aragon Ballroom residency, and unfortunately, this story broke right after you left town, and I was like, where's Tony when I need him? But there was a Bill Simmons podcast interview with Cody Rhodes, and I have his quote here that I'd like to read. And I know you don't typically like to talk about this, but I think this is worth getting your opinion on, where Cody said, if I ever felt disrespected at WWE, that's one thing. That's the Yankees. That's the flagship of it all. If I ever felt there, I was a number on a sheet maybe. But feeling disrespected at something I built with my friends, feeling disrespected there, I wouldn't stand for it. As a boss, as a promoter, as a person, does it not bother you that he's saying that he would tolerate disrespect from one place, but not the place that he helped build with you? He
does a lot of interviews, and I think when you have to say so many words so often because he works so hard. He works such a big schedule. And to his credit, I bet he does hundreds of interviews a year. And I'm not sure I agree with that, but I also would give him the benefit of the doubt that, I've heard him say a lot of positive things too. And for somebody that doesn't work here and that's involved in the competitive promotion, he's usually pretty gracious with the things he says. And I've seen him since he's been gone, and it's always been very positive and good. And, I have only good things to say about him and his contributions here. So
I just know that if my family had been put through everything that the Rhodes family had been put through by that company for 30 or 40 years, for him to then come back and say, well, I can tolerate disrespect from one place, I know that would bother me a lot as a person.
It's okay. That's okay. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. Like I said, I appreciate you asking me, Case. But it's the holidays. It was Christmas last week. I wish everybody the best. I'm very happy with AEW. And when I was sitting here again a year ago, if anybody had questions about where the promotion was going, again, I think Jon Moxley is a great example of somebody who also through this year has worked really, really hard and fought his way through the fire. And as a leader of AEW, all of us have come through to the other side of it. And I absolutely feel like I have so many things to be grateful for. This was one of the best weekends I've ever had in my life. After Fulham picked up the third straight Premier League win in a London derby, and then to be able to go to AEW World's End, have this incredible pay-per-view, take a red-eye to Indianapolis, on almost no sleep, head to Lucas Oil Stadium and be able to celebrate a win with my dad and the team, and then to be able to go home and put World's End on the TV and be able to watch it again. It was really about as perfect of a weekend as I've had. So I'm very happy with where things are at, and I wish everybody who's left here the best, including Cody, and I think he's done a lot of great things, and I wish him the best.
Holiday season for us means Christmas, it means New Year's, and it means on January 4th, Wrestle Kingdom, which I know for you and I is a very important part of our holiday season. This year, Hiroshi Tanahashi is retiring at the Tokyo Dome. Before we talk about his career, can you talk about what your relationship has been like working with Hiroshi Tanahashi?
Yeah, I really like Hiroshi Tanahashi. As my counterpart, as the president of New Japan Pro Wrestling, we have an excellent relationship, but also he's wrestled here with me before, and I had a great relationship as a wrestler and a producer with him as well. And I also wanted to have a very special final AEW event with Hiroshi Tanahashi, which is why I had this idea to have the Lights Out cage match, where the other fan favorites, the heroes of AEW, came together with Hiroshi Tanahashi, and to have something special. We had this event, Forbidden Door, that he was very involved in. The first Forbidden Door, the main event was Jon Moxley versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. So I thought with how Jon Moxley's presentation had changed, and now with Jon Moxley having gone from being a fan favorite to, at that point, big villain in AEW, I thought that the Lights Out cage match would be an amazing way for so many great AEW stars to come together, and a lot of faces from Tanahashi's past, like including Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, and to see all these great stars together in the Lights Out cage match made me very happy. But also I'm very happy that Tanahashi's having this amazing run towards his retirement. He's achieved so much in his career. Who's to say where we would all be without him right now? And I think it's awesome that New Japan Pro Wrestling's having this great business lift and doing really well, and that they're going to sell so many tickets for Hiroshi Tanahashi's retirement match. And I'm very happy that AEW is able to be involved in any way in this show.
Is there any truth to the idea that Tanahashi wanted Shinsuke Nakamura as his final opponent, and you weren't happy with that? That
is actually something I read about, and I was surprised to read that. I'm not sure where that all came from. I don't really understand some of that story, and it was a very detailed story with a lot of, if I may, what's the word I'm looking for? it seemed like they thought they could read minds when they wrote that story, because it was like, not only did they say like, well, this happened and this happened, but they're like, and he felt this way about it and he felt this way. And then he was thinking, and it's like, well, like, are you telepathic? Like, a lot of that never happened. And a lot of it was like, how would you know what that guy was thinking or that guy? So, I thought that was an interesting story. I'll put it that way. But I've talked to him extensively about his retirement, worked with him, and the idea of having Kazuchika Okada as his final opponent, it's such an iconic thing. And their rivalry is so important to New Japan Pro Wrestling and to both men's careers and to what has gone on to be a very successful promotion with AEW. And I think it's perfect, and I'm very happy for Okada to be involved at Wrestle Kingdom as the final opponent of Tanahashi for what will be Tanahashi's retirement match, and something we're so excited about.
Good. It wouldn't be an interview with me if we didn't talk about Mexico briefly.
I was going to say, where's the lucha?
We're getting the lucha. Don't worry, Cubs fan. It's coming now. Any plans for AEW to be back in Mexico in 2026? Could we see another Grand Slam Mexico? I know the last time you were here, we talked about how much we love the Dynamite from Arena Mexico. Are there plans in the works for that again?
100%. I definitely want to do Grand Slam Mexico again, and we have amazing partners in CMLL, so I would want to work with them, and we're going to work with them. So Grand Slam Mexico will be back in 2026, and I'm just pleased that they'll have us, and I can't wait to go back. We had a great experience in Arena Mexico in Mexico City. There are other great cities in Mexico that we'd like to visit, and that's something that I hope to be able to do, and would do with the great pleasure of partnering with CMLL and them hosting us in their territory and their venues. It's an honor. I love working with Salvador and everybody at CMLL, and they're having a great year, and it's been great with AEW and CMLL working together this year.
Are you? I don't know if you're comfortable answering this question. Hechicero is on the dual contract with AEW and CMLL. Is Mascara Dorado on a dual contract? Has there been any effort to sign more people to deals like Hechicero?
Yes. There will be more attempts to do things like that, which are very beneficial to us. Hechicero has been involved in great matches in multiple promotions this year, whether it was working for AEW, CMLL, and in ROH, where he's been a top challenger for the championship. So Hechicero is a great example of that, and I would like to do more things like that.
AEW Match of the Year, 2025, what is it?
There's a lot of recency bias where I felt like right now I'm still very much fired up and feeling the emotion of the crowd from Jon Moxley versus Kyle Fletcher.
Yes.
And I could absolutely roll with that. It's hard to pick. I mean, I would really need to sit down, and I just watched that again.
Yeah.
I'd like to sit down and watch Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page again. I'd like to sit down and watch more, because it's been a few months since I sat down and put that on TV. I'd like to watch Hangman Page versus Will Ospreay again.
My pick.
I think that could be a great pick for that. And
how often are you rewatching AEW stuff?
I rewatch the stuff I really love and go back and watch
Okay.
it. A lot of the things I go back and watch the most are from the pandemic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
It was the hardest to put together the shows. I have a great appreciation for that, because I think it kept the company together at a tough time, especially at the beginning when there was so much uncertainty, and we kept putting on new shows every week, no matter what the crew was or the situation. Probably the shows I'm the proudest of are actually the shows we did in QT's gym.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's where the TNT Championship came from. That was the most difficult it ever got to do tapings, and I'm very glad that we did them, and there's a lot of people that work those events as extras that have jobs here to this day because of what they did stepping up for the company.
Absolutely. I'll get you out here in a second. I know we're
No,
going long,
I'm in no rush. You may need the studio, but I really like doing this, so I'll stay.
No, I think we're the only people in here today.
Oh, good. So great. I'll hang out. I'm not in a rush to get out of here.
Good.
So this is one of the highlights of my year.
Because you mentioned the TV there, and I was thinking about this recently about, do you approach booking Dynamite and Collision in different ways? Because I talk to you, and I know a lot of the wrestling that you like, and sometimes Collision has a tone to it that I really like, and Dynamite feels like the American wrestling show that we've sort of existed in a post-Nitro universe, and then Collision's like, what was this Crockett on Saturday night? What's going on here? I feel like they have different tones, but do you approach them differently?
Absolutely.
How so?
There are things that I do on Collision that I think are excellent wrestling, And I'm not as obsessed with the minute-by-minute.
You're obsessed with
patterns.
the minute-by-minutes for Dynamite.
I am.
Yes.
I'm obsessed with it. And I'm obsessed with Collision being a great wrestling show that the wrestling fans love. And my goal for Collision is the wrestling fans tell the other wrestling fans, people, guys, I don't want there to ever be a perception like, oh, even though I know some fans think that, oh, I can watch Dynamite and I'll get everything. That's not the case. A lot of the best stuff is on Collision. And I want the wrestling fans to spread the virus like I have. I was a virus-spreading wrestling fan that made other wrestling fans that would go to school and bring people over and show them tapes of my favorite stuff and get other people into wrestling. Now, that's a tricky thing because sometimes you might make a new fan that will watch wrestling on their own, or you might make somebody that'll watch wrestling with you, but only when you're around and you get them to watch it with you. So you never know how effectively you've spread that virus. But I hope for Collision, people spread that virus with it and say, like, I love wrestling and you should watch this because they put so much great wrestling on. Dynamite is, and it's all just opinions. I think Dynamite is that, but with that obsession of knowing that weeknight, primetime, minute-by-minute viewership is balanced with the great wrestling, because there's some of the best wrestling and best wrestling matches are on Dynamite.
Absolutely. And I know for a point in time, the longer a marquee match was going on, the minute-by-minutes would go up. But has that changed in maybe a post-pandemic TV viewing universe? If you're obsessed with the minute-by-minutes on Dynamite, what are the things you're doing to ensure that those stay at a certain level?
It just depends. A long match, it depends on who's participating and when it is and what it is. And it's not like every long match is necessarily going to bring in more viewers if it's not the people that are going to bring in the viewership. And that isn't always the case. Just because somebody hasn't done big numbers in their career at one point doesn't mean later they couldn't.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of double.
that's
a lot of. So let me try to phrase that where it's not 6 double negatives in a sentence. But
think about the growth of Kyle Fletcher and what he meant at one point to your television versus what he means now.
Absolutely. Or Darby's a great example too. When I first tried using Darby on the show at the beginning, Darby wasn't the biggest draw, but he became a draw by people seeing what he was and realizing, oh, this is a very important part of the presentation. And at first, I think people might have even looked at him like, oh, this is like a very interesting cruiserweight. And then as the show went on, people realized, oh, this is one of the most important people on this show. And I agree with you. Kyle Fletcher grew. He grew into his body. He grew as a wrestler. He grew as a star. And that's another great example. So again, different examples. I think Toni Storm came in as a big star in women's wrestling, but Toni Storm has transformed in AEW from being a big free agent wrestling star to one of the signature stars of this promotion and a signature wrestling star with a very different presentation than what anybody had ever been accustomed to, and I'm very proud of that.
Let's end with this. We're going to exit the AEW universe. You're not allowed to talk about wrestling you own for just a second. Sure. It's the holiday season. People are at home. They're probably looking for some wrestling to watch. New Year's Smash is going to be live on TBS tomorrow night. We're all going to watch that. But for maybe a newer wrestling fan, somebody that discovered AEW this year, somebody that's just looking to broaden their horizons, do you have one piece of a wrestling recommendation that everybody should sit down and watch after they're done with this interview? A match, an angle, something from the 80s, something from the 90s? What do you want people watching to feel like they would maybe help understand the wrestling mind of Tony Khan more?
There's a lot of things. I don't think it's any one thing because I like wrestling from different places. What do you like right now? What are you watching right now that you don't own? Is there any older wrestling or just wrestling outside of AEW or ROH that you're watching?
I
like watching Memphis studio wrestling to see the presentation and the way the formats are put together because it would change a lot.
Yeah.
There would be ideas in the flow, and sometimes it'll give me an idea for something. I like watching a lot of old Mid-South wrestling, but I also like watching the in-ring wrestling of all sorts of different companies in the world. CMLL and New Japan are putting out great matches and great shows, but they format the TVs very differently. And to be able to put on 104 episodes of wrestling television a year, you're going to want to try different things with the format. And that's one of those things when we started doing Forbidden Door that I think there's a better understanding of why I need to have all the people here to do wrestling TV and do angles.
Yes.
And like,
was that a hang up initially?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't understand. And it's okay. But when we're doing a pay-per-view, you have to send people over and do angles and do build-up, and I can't just announce the matches. And
was the first Forbidden Door, with all of the injuries and the fact that it was the start of this new partnership, is that the most stressful pay-per-view you've ever had to put together?
No.
What beats that? Because I will almost want an oral history on the first Forbidden Door.
The most stressful pay-per-view is the Wembley.
Oh,
the first Wembley.
Okay.
By far.
That makes sense.
Samoa Joe saved the day there.
How so?
I think it was very good that Samoa Joe de-escalated the situation, and also that Samoa Joe made sure that the fans got the match that they thought they had paid to see. And he went out there and everything was great. And he was such a professional. And that exemplifies Samoa Joe in the ring and out of the ring, the most professional man. And he was so great that day and so many other times. He's one of the most incredible people I've ever met. What a leader Samoa Joe is in the ring and out of the ring. A captain, a true captain of a team. And I'm very blessed that he's in AEW.
Tony Khan, we've reached the end of the interview. And I have to say, I'm shocked at how little you've plugged New Year's Smash, which is live on TBS tomorrow. You want to look into that camera and let people know
I do.
What they've got going on?
Can we talk? Yeah, I'd like to talk about New Year's Smash. Because this is your interview. It's your set. I'm really letting you lead, Case.
Which is much appreciated.
I'm trying not to shove plugs in here. So I've been respectful of your stature as preeminent interviewer. And I have to say that I'm really excited about the final AEW event of the year. It's been this great year, in my opinion, for AEW, and there's one show left. It's New Year's Smash. It's New Year's Eve. It's coming up tomorrow night, and we're going to end on a very, very high note. Now, a few matches and a few things we announced at the end of the pay-per-view. First of all, TBS Championship match. What a year Mercedes Moné is having. She was voted as the Female Wrestler of the Year worldwide by Sports Illustrated in the year-end wrestling awards. She's held championships all over the world, and she's the face of TBS, the Superstation, a channel with over 50 years of history in pro wrestling. And Mercedes Moné, to me, she's done so many great things all over the world, but recently she's been in all these great matches, and after having such an incredible record and accumulating all these championships, recently we've seen Mercedes Moné face some adversity, and a lot of fans are happy to see that. Now, on the other side of the equation, somebody who is having a fantastic year, who's very popular with the fans, and has been in AEW for many, many years and worked really hard to get into this position, a former TBS champion herself, although her reign was not as long as Mercedes Moné, who's been the champion now for over a year. Willow Nightingale, one half of the World Tag Team Champions, one half of the Babes of Wrath. The Babes of Wrath, they had a great match with Athena, the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion, and Mercedes, the TBS Champion. I thought it was tremendous, and we saw Willow score the win over Mercedes in the match. They've had a great rivalry. Mercedes said she wanted to fight Willow. She had some not very nice things to say about Willow, and I thought it would be a fantastic match for the TBS Championship to end the year on such a high note with a great match. Mercedes Moné versus Willow Nightingale for the TBS Championship on New Year's Eve, New Year's Smash. That's going to be a fantastic match. Also, when I mentioned the big free agents that have come into AEW, somebody who has come so far in terms of showing people who he really is Ricochet. From the Continental Classic a year ago, the Continental Classic really allowed Ricochet to show people a side of him they hadn't seen. And I felt like if I put Ricochet in a situation where he's going into Hammerstein Ballroom and he's in these important matches with two of AEW's greatest fan favorites, Will Ospreay and Darby Allin, I knew the crowd would get behind Will Ospreay and Darby Allin. They're established favorites here. Ricochet is a huge free agent, but I felt like the crowd would turn on him and he would be able to ride that momentum, and it worked incredibly well. He advanced to the semifinals of the Continental Classic last year by milking the clock on Christmas night Dynamite against Darby Allin. and it was a successful move. He got what he wanted. He just needed 1 point, a draw. And after he had milked the clock out, the crowd was angry with him. And I fed Justin Roberts' ear, and he delivered it very well. Ricochet is going to World's End. And the crowd was so boo. They did not like that at all. And I felt like Ricochet in the past year has become one of the most hated villains in wrestling. And I also think he's become a really important person in AEW. And now he's the national champion.
How great was the Bandito match, by the way?
Fantastic. What a great Christmas Eve match. Again, you talk about bringing great wrestling to the holidays. Now, that match was very different from the Continental Classic matches. You liked that match, it sounds
Loved
like.
Loved it. Anything Bandito's touched this year, I've been a huge fan of.
But that is different. That was a very different presentation of wrestling. It's a one-on-one wrestling match, but it was very different than the Continental matches.
Very much so.
So maybe there's room, to the point we made at the beginning of the interview, to come back full circle, to have different elements in a wrestling show. I didn't put the tight restrictions on that match for the Dynamite Diamond that I had all the Continental matches that weekend. So across the Christmas shows, you had 9 Continental Classic matches, I think, across 2 shows. No interference, no shenanigans in any of those matches. Ricochet and Bandito was a lot of fun. I didn't put the same restrictions on because I think there's room to have some different matches. And Ricochet, in this case, played fast and loose with the rules. Bandito was still able to overcome it. And I thought it was a lot of fun. It was also very different than the other matches on the show. So maybe that goes to the point we were making at the beginning of the show, that not every match needs to be exactly like the Continental Classic.
No, I don't need every match to be like that. I do like it rooted in the sport of pro wrestling, and I feel like Ricochet versus Bandito also fit that. But Bandito's been, what a 2025 he's had.
I totally agree.
I think you have real magic in finding tag team partners that maybe weren't initially tag team partners, and you did it with you did it with Bowens and Castor. Just the way you found them as a pair, and then the Brody King Bandito tag team.
Jet
Speed, my apologies, because Jet Speed at the Aragon Ballroom had one of my favorite AEW matches of the year with FTR. But it's a real knack of yours, I think, to find these tag teams and put them together and let them ride like you do.
I really appreciate that. I take a lot of pride in knowing that there might be chemistry with people that hadn't necessarily been together. I think those are some good examples of it. And Sting and Darby Allin is probably my very favorite example.
If I were you, that would be my favorite. I think that worked out quite well for everybody involved.
That was my favorite, but and I'm glad you like that. There have been so many great pairings, and I'm really proud to be able to be a matchmaker of wrestling matches against each other, but also a matchmaker making new pairings. Luther with Timeless Tony Storm, Mariah May with Timeless Tony Storm. I think those were good calls for what they became. Some ideas I had, and I enjoy putting pairings of people together, and sometimes they stay together and it's friends for life, like Sting and Darby Allin, and sometimes it can go the other way. Kenny and Hangman.
Yeah.
Hadn't done a lot of stuff together before I really wanted to do the Kenny and Hangman, and that worked out incredibly well. So that's another good example of that. And I do think, because the first time Kenny and Hangman we did, I had them in Philadelphia on the 3rd episode of Dynamite, and amazingly, and I had a feeling it would work out between these two. It just took a while to get them back together. It was Hangman and Kenny against Mox and Pac in Philadelphia on the 3rd episode of Dynamite. And Mox and Pac, the chemistry that they didn't find that night, they found years later in the Death Riders. What a great run we've had here. But I really do love putting people in that position to team up and put some new combos together, and that's another side of matchmaking.
And that culminates tomorrow night. We end 2025 New Year Smash live on TBS.
It's going to be fantastic. So to your point with that, I am really excited about what we've been able to do, but there's somebody who's come back to AEW that I'm also excited about, and somebody who's been able to recapture some of that same magic, somebody my mom was really excited to see on Christmas and hear that music again, and that's Jungle Jack Perry. I think JR was onto something with the Jungle Jack name, and I always thought he was. And I've always loved the presentation. I've always thought Jack's a great wrestler, and I'm really glad that we were able to make lemonade out of the lemon that was Darby's injury. I got back here to Chicago late on Thanksgiving because I was spending Thanksgiving morning with Darby in the hospital in Nashville. I love Darby very much. I love spending time with him. That's probably not the way I'd planned to spend Thanksgiving morning. And I, unbelievably then, because he asked me to, I rescheduled things, and Darby's place, Darby at the time, and Speedball Bailey did not have a match that week in the tournament. There was no match that week, and I ended up rescheduling things. It's always ended up with the Final Four, with the semifinals I had expected there to be. But the scheduling from the end of week one through Christmas was very different. I reorganized matches to get where I wanted to be, changed plans, results, reorganized the league schedule and who would be wrestling who on the final days. And we still ended up with the great plans of World's End and having these incredible matches with Okada to Takeshita, something people really were anticipating, and I still think there's a lot of investment into, and with Moxley and Fletcher, which became one of the matches of the year, and of course to have this incredible Mox versus Okada final, the first time ever, two of the greats in my opinion that had never wrestled before, and what a place to have their first match. And Jungle Jack Perry stepped into the tournament, and I thought he delivered and was fantastic. He had great matches, and talk about big shoes to fill with Darby Allin, but Jungle Jack Perry's another great AEW star. They're totally different wrestlers, which is why I felt like the schedule should go differently. I shouldn't just paste Jack into Darby's schedule, and I didn't. I saw somebody who I sometimes has some good opinions on social media, Suit Williams. I like Suit Williams.
I love Suit Williams.
It's a Observer Deep Guy. He said, they didn't rebook this at all. It's just Darby. No, I had to redo a lot, Suit Williams. I let him know. There was a lot of work I did here, actually, that this changed a lot of things, man. And I thought it would be very hacky if it had ended up with Jack and Pac on the last night. And you're like, oh, this is exactly what Darby was going to do.
Okay.
And so I reorganized things a lot to make sure that you wouldn't feel like on Christmas, like, did they just paste Jack for Darby in here? No, I didn't at all. And Jack stepped up and delivered so much. And then after coming in as an underdog with 0 points and fighting his way in where he was tied for the lead going into the last night in the Gold League, I thought Jack really delivered, stepped up, and now when I had all these great wrestlers, I put a lot of the stars that had not advanced to the semifinal and got them involved on the World's End 0 Hour. And Jungle Jack scored a pin over the national champion Ricochet. I think these are two great wrestlers. They have very different paths that they took to get here. They've had very different paths when you look at where they were 12, 14 months ago to be where they are now. For Ricochet to be in AEW, to be an established star, and be this really hated villain after coming in as a really embraced free agent, and for Jungle Jack to have come full circle and to be a fan favorite again, and to be aligned with Luchasaurus again, and to have the Tarzan Boy music, which I know you and I as CMLL fans really appreciate the origins of that, as Tarzan Boy fan that I am. I love it. And having Jungle Jack back here, I think it's fantastic. And I think he would be a tremendous AEW national champion. I'd love to have Jack Perry representing AEW on TV and traveling places across the country, showing off the AEW logo. So I think that's a great match. They seemed like they had great chemistry on the 0 Hour, and I'm excited for Jungle Jack Perry versus Ricochet. I like them both very much individually, and I think they'll have a lot of chemistry for a one-on-one match. So a couple big championship matches right off the bat with Ricochet versus Jungle Jack Perry, Mercedes Moné versus Willow. Speaking of the champions...
Hey, you got a new world champion. Hasn't even come up in this interview.
Yeah, you haven't asked me, so I want to bring it up, and I'm very excited to have a new world champion, and it's MJF. And MJF's somebody who has done so much for AEW, has been here since the beginning, and has had the most commercial success outside of wrestling in his career this past year. somebody who, I was with NFL coaches and they were blown away. That's you're a wrestler from AEW playing Happy Gilmore's son in the Happy Gilmore 2 movie. That's crazy. And to have the most watched movie in America feature an AEW wrestler in a very prominent role is a big deal. And MJF's booking more and more big acting roles. So getting him back in AEW was something very big. He's somebody who has done very, very well commercially for us. Big ratings, big box office. He's also a very talented in-ring wrestler.
I think incredibly underrated.
I agree.
As a wrestler himself.
I think some of the best wrestling matches this year, he's been in a lot of them. And in MJF and Mystico, when we talk about some of the best matches to go back and watch, certainly outside of AEW, that's my favorite match all year.
That's mine too, is from the anniversary show.
Yep.
Yeah, that's as good as wrestling gets. I mean, that's the crowd. It was
great.
That's what it should be.
It was absolutely fantastic. I love that match. And I thought John Cruz also as a manager was fantastic. And is fantastic. He's very talented. And being here, both of us Illinois guys from the land of Lincoln, Jonathan Cruz was excellent in that, and as his Abraham Lincoln character.
That's right.
So I thought that was fantastic, and now we'll hear from MJF, the new champion. He'll have a lot to say tomorrow night on New Year's Eve on New Year's Smash, and I'm excited for that, and a lot more to announce too. I'll be talking about it. We're evaluating the health of the wrestlers. Everyone's so beat up coming out of World's End, but I expect a lot of other huge matches. I'm going to make New Year's Smash a must-watch show, and I really feel like it's important to end the year on a high note because after we built this excitement and not to belabor it, but captured the Sports Illustrated Pro Wrestling Promotion of the Year, and I think we have the opportunity to win more awards in wrestling-focused publications, not just a mainstream sports publication like Sports Illustrated, which is huge, but also within the wrestling space that you're a huge part of, Case, although you're not as huge a part as you used to be because you look like you've lost probably 30 pounds since last time I was here, but I'm just guessing. But there's less of you than there was. So you're not.
I used to take up so much space. I take up less space now.
Yeah, you're a huge part of the community in terms of your presence online and on the radio, but physically you're not as huge as part as you used to be. You're a very physically fit man now, and there's nothing funny about a physically fit man, as we all know. But I have to say, it's an honor anytime we can be in consideration, and I've heard that we're trending well and have the chance to capture more awards, and I feel like that is a good example of why this has been a better year than last year. And some people might prefer things from last year to this year. I think this has been more successful in many ways. And for every wrestling promotion of the year worldwide, I would say we had one of the most important objectives to hit with delivering on this media rights deal, because I think there's a lot of pressure when you sign a deal that's a $500 million deal to do your media rights, and knowing that you have to do 104 shows and have 9 great pay-per-view events. And I really feel like we've been consistently delivering the best quality week to week that we have. So I'll definitely want to end on a high note with New Year's Smash. Wrestling's the only sport with no off season. For AEW, we've created the expectation that the calendar year is effectively the start of a new season, new annual records. Even though we don't get a true off season, this will feel like the end of the season, the last show of the year, and effectively the cherry on top to what I think has been my own personal favorite, and it's just my opinion, my own personal favorite year of AEW yet, as somebody who I think it's fair to say I really do love AEW and wrestling and what we do. And yeah, I've never enjoyed it more. This is a favorite time for me. And to be able to sit here in this seat with you and to feel like the promotion is better received by our fellow hardcore fans and also has had that commercial success. And we've had the great matches and the great wrestling and also that we're in such a tremendous position for the years to come. I think that's part of why I think this has been such a successful year, and I'm glad to be able to sit here with you with one show left to go, and it's Wednesday Night Dynamite, 7 p.m. Central here in Chicago, 8 p.m. Eastern if you're watching this online. It'll be a great way to spend your New Year's Eve.
Tony Khan, thank you so much. Q101 Chicago for all things Chicago and alternative. I'm on Instagram @_Case Lowe. That is CASELOWE if you like this interview. Tony, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time. This has been tremendous. I could have spent 27 more minutes talking Will Ospreay alone with you, or 34 more minutes talking Lucha Libre, or 82 minutes of talking about Memphis wrestling. So
next time you come here, bring Bryan Danielson with you. We'll do a whole big set. We'll talk about anything you guys want to talk about. We'll talk about all the old luchadors that you guys like. We'll have a big conversation about it.
You don't need me here for that. You should just get your own.
No. I want you and Bryan together. I've been asking for this.
That's fair. And I think, like, if I'm here with Bryan Danielson, I feel like everybody's just you should just talk to Bryan then. I have not, I don't need to butt in. So that's why I think that we're good spaced out. I enjoy being with Bryan, but if Bryan Danielson's on the set, I don't need to chime in. You can talk to him.
Well, Tony, thank you for coming on set. Have a great day.
Thanks, Case. Good to see you.